Sunday, December 30, 1973, over 65,000 fans filled Texas Stadium to witness the National Football Conference Championship game between the Dallas Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings. Dallas head coach Tom Landry has his Cowboys in postseason play for an unprecedented 8th time in 8 seasons. But for today's game, the Cowboys are not as ready as in previous years, where injuries to 2 critical players have left some questions to be answered. On defense, Bob Lilly will not be starting for the Cowboys for the first time in his 13-year career. On offense, Calvin Hill, the Cowboys' 1,000-yard runner, will be missing, having sustained a dislocated elbow in the Cowboys' last game. But the Cowboys are by now playoff tested and playoff toughened. Though Lilly sat out virtually all of last week's playoff game and Hill missed much of the second half, the Cowboys were still able to hold the explosive Ram attack to 1 touchdown and had enough firepower to score 27 points against the league's best defense. So there's no need to pity the talent-rich Cowboys despite their absent superstars. Viking head coach Bud Grant led Minnesota to its third 12-2 season under his coaching regime, and last week outcoached George Allen when the Vikings qualified for the conference championship game. Many Vikings remain from the Super Bowl IV team that was upset by the Kansas City Chiefs, and they have dedicated themselves to a return trip to the Super Bowl and a chance to erase that disaster. This season, Minnesota has come back strong, and the 1973 team may be the best that Minnesota has ever fielded. The Vikings are better because Fran Tarkenton has added an offensive dimension to a team that had become defense-oriented. Though Tarkenton failed to bring the results hoped for when the Vikings traded for him last season, this year, Fran is the man. Tarkenton's big play receiver is John Gilliam, who caught 8 touchdown passes during the regular season and 2 more in the Vikings' victory over the Redskins last week. Another new element in Minnesota is a running game, as Rookie of the Year candidate Chuck Foreman rushed for over 800 yards this season. But the old standbys are still there, too. The Viking defense was not as big play conscious as in past seasons, but they didn't have to be, as the Vikings now have a great blend of offense and defense. I'm Al Meltzer, and this is the Minnesota Vikings versus the Dallas Cowboys for the championship of the National Football Conference in the NFL Game of the Week. For the Cowboys, the first half was to be one of almost total frustration on offense. Though the Cowboys were the second best running team in the NFC, the Viking defense held Calvin Hill's replacement, Robert Newhouse, number 44, and number 32, Walt Garrison, to just 28 yards rushing in the first half. With Hill missing, the Cowboys' straight-ahead power was almost non-existent, and when they tried draws and delays, they fared no better. After 2 first-period possessions went nowhere, Cowboy quarterback Roger Staubach turned to the air, but he could complete just 2 passes in the half, and when he did connect, his receivers paid. Finally, there was the task of containing Staubach himself, and Gary Larson handled that very nicely. So dominant was the Viking defense that on their 4 first-half possessions, the Cowboy offense totaled just 4 first downs and only 61 total yards. Meanwhile, the Minnesota offense ran almost twice as many plays from scrimmage and ate up most of the first half on 2 playbook-perfect ball possession drives. Tarkenton first established his ground game, sending Foreman behind running mate Oscar Reed's blocks. On the first drive, Tarkenton mixed Foreman runs with short, safe sideline passes in front of the Cowboy defensive backs. Both Gilliam and Jim Lash, number 82, another speed burner, were able to get free because the Cowboys were forced to respect their long ball capability. With Dallas becoming increasingly pass conscious, Tarkenton went back to Foreman, and he slashed further into Dallas territory. Moving almost at will, Tarkenton was a portrait of confidence, running a fake end around before hitting Oscar Reed, who carried inside the Cowboy 10-yard line. Finally, from the 7, Reed found a giant tear in the Dallas defense and thought he had finished the Viking drive. But on the play, the Vikings were detected holding, an unpardonable sin on a running play, and on a repeat, we can catch the culprit. Watch number 50, Cowboy linebacker D.D. Lewis. He is the man who was moved out to create the big hole for Reed. But notice that Ron Yeri, in blocking Lewis, grabbed onto Lewis's shirt, this bringing about the penalty and nullifying the score. The lost touchdown was costly, where it was not regained when, on a 3rd and 17, Tarkenton lost 14 more yards when sacked by Harvey Martin and Pat Toomey. What made matters worse was that Tarkenton had been trapped on the 37, bringing up a 44-yard field goal try by Fred Cox, who had not hit from longer than 41 yards this season. But this time, Cox was successful, and Minnesota was first on the board, leading 3-0. On Minnesota's second long drive, Tarkenton again tried the down-and-out attack, but this time the Dallas backs were waiting. With the outside now a painful course at best, Tarkenton turned to a new attack designed to take advantage of Cowboy middle linebacker Leroy Jordan's great pursuit. Using play-action fakes and rolling out to his right, Tarkenton began to throw back across the grain into the middle of the Dallas defense. Repeating the play that was to be the key to this drive, we can see how Jordan was influenced out of his coverage area. Watch Jordan, number 55, when he sees Tarkenton roll out to one side, he rotates his coverage that way, leaving the zone open to a throwback into his area. Tarkenton continued to use the play, and it continued to work for him as Foreman was the next man to sneak into Jordan's zone. Foreman's hands betrayed him on this one, but he would more than make up for his sour hands with his sweet feet. In the first half, Foreman ran for 70 yards and exhibited why he is the leading candidate for Rookie of the Year honor. The Vikings eventually reached 4th and inches in Dallas territory. And in a highly uncharacteristic move, the usually conservative Bud Grant decided to gamble. Oscar Reed got the critical yard, and the Viking drive continued. Then, just for old time's sake, Tarkenton did his scramble routine, and Minnesota was 10 yards closer to the Dallas goal line. Finally, from the 5, Foreman swept right and outran Charlie Waters to the corner of the end zone, putting Minnesota on top 10-0. The score could have been worse. Although Dallas had had the ball only 10 minutes to the Vikings 20 and had been outgained by over 100 yards, they were still in the game. But the Vikings had run 2 time-consuming drives. And if they continued to keep the ball away from the Cowboy offense, as they had in the first half, 10 points would be more than enough. A Texas-sized 3-ring circus served to brighten the mood in City Stadium after the Cowboys' offensive and defensive pratfalls during the first half. But trailing by 10-0 had only made the task more difficult, not impossible, for the proud Cowboys as they reemerged for what could be their last 30 minutes of action in the 1973 season. It was clear that they meant to turn the tables on the Minnesota Vikings, and the first step was to establish physical control of the game. So Doomsday came out hitting. And on the third play of the second half, the Cowboys almost got the needed break. But Tarkenton recovered his mistake for a loss of 1, and for the first time in the game, the Vikings were forced to give up possession without moving the football. And then the Cowboys did get the break when Mike Eyeshide hit this punt for only 26 yards, shanking it out of bounds at the Viking 48-yard line. But when Roger Staubach tried to swing this pass to Robert Newhouse, Wally Hilgenberg sent blockers and ball carrier flying like so many duck pins. 2 plays later, on 3rd and 12, Staubach went deep for Drew Pearson. The Vikings' number 20, Bobby Bryant, played the man and the ball perfectly, and he intercepted the pass instinctively, when the better play would have been to bat it away and force the Cowboys to punt. Bryant's interception marooned the Vikings at their own 2-yard line. 3 thrusts into the Doomsday defense netted only 3 yards. And on 4th down, Mike Eyeshide was forced to kick from deep in his own end zone. This time, Eyeshide boomed the football 58 yards upfield. But this punt, like Eyeshide's earlier 26-yarder, worked in favor of the Cowboys because Eyeshide outkicked his coverage. And key blocks by Dave Edwards, Billy Joe Dupree, and Charlie Waters loosed Golden Richards up the sideline for a 63-yard whirl-away touchdown, which narrowed the Minnesota lead to 10-7. Richards' return virtually obliterated the Vikings' first-half domination and put the fired-up Dallas Cowboys squarely in the middle of a brand-new football game. But the plucky Fred Tarkenton refused to sulk after the milk had been spilled, and as soon as he got his hands back on the football, he had the Minnesota attack in high gear. And 3 plays after Golden Richards' glittering touchdown return, Tarkenton unloosed this lightning bolt for John Gilliam, and the Vikings reestablished their 10-point lead at 17-7. A repeat will show that Gilliam simply beat double coverage deep, and that Tarkenton hit him with a perfect pass. All season long, the Vikings have found ways and means to deep six opponents in critical situations. And though the Cowboys had been able to stifle John Hadle and the diminutive Harold Jackson in the previous week's playoff game with the same double coverage, it was not enough to keep Gilliam out of the end zone from 54 yards away. But as befits a team of championship mettle, Dallas came scratching back. First, Staubach connected with Billy Joe Dupree for 20 yards. And he found Walt Garrison for a tough 10 more. Robert Newhouse then rammed up the Viking middle for 19 more yards, carrying Dallas to the Minnesota 32-yard line. And though Dallas surely missed the services of their multi-skilled 1,000-yard back Calvin Hill, a slow-motion repeat of Newhouse's run shows that they were compensating for his absence with 2nd, 3rd, and 4th efforts. using Newhouse and number 23, Mike Montgomery, as talented substitutes for Calvin Hill's running and pass-catching skills. Dallas penetrated to the Minnesota 17-yard line. But with 3rd and 9, Roger Staubach scrambled and fell 2 yards short of a first down. And after a promising 10-play drive, Dallas had to settle for 3 points, making the score Minnesota 17, Dallas 10. Two plays after the ensuing kickoff, Dallas had a chance to tie the game when Charlie Waters speared the ball from Chuck Foreman's arm, but Cliff Harris fell on the loose football without trying to advance it. And Harris's conservative play backfired 1 play later when Roger Staubach's pass bounced off Billy Joe Dupree's hard hands and into the soft squeeze of the Minnesota middle linebacker number 50, Jeff Seaman. But consecutive sacks by D.D. Lewis and Harvey Martin forced Minnesota into a hole. And at the top of the 4th quarter, Tarkenton threw this interception to Cowboys number 41, Charlie Waters. And Dallas was threatening again, deep in Viking territory. In need of a big play, the Vikings turned to the blitz. And though Staubach had called a screen left, a leaping Jim Marshall would not let him release the football. And Wally Hilgenberg once again came through with the big play for Minnesota. And then the front 4 Norsemen came on. Number 70, Jim Marshall, got to Staubach before he could raise the ball, causing this fumble recovered by number 77, Gary Larson. But incredibly, no sooner had the Vikings reclaimed the football than they turned it over again on this handoff. And Larry Cole took possession for Dallas. And on the very next play, Roger Staubach stepped back and threw a touchdown pass to number 20, Bobby Bryant, the Viking right cornerback. Almost inconceivably, these two well-seasoned teams had turned the ball over in 6 consecutive series of downs, but not until Bryant's interception had one team profited and the other team lost. A replay shows that Bryant followed Hayes in motion and that Staubach never looked Bryant off his intended receiver. Timing his move perfectly, Bryant took the ball out of Hayes' hands, and the Vikings' lead was boosted to 24-10. And on the very first play after the kickoff, Staubach made it 7 turnovers in 7 series, when Jeff Wright, number 23, took this deflection to set up a Viking field goal, making the score 27-10. And when Dallas could not move the football after the kickoff, this preposterous string of turnovers turned to 8 in a row when Bobby Bryant muffed this fair catch attempt and Bill Gregory recovered, giving Dallas one last hope for life. Staubach immediately stepped back and found Drew Pearson, who made a leaping catch at the Minnesota 15. And when the Vikings' number 43, Nate Wright, was detected draped all over the Cowboys' Bob Hayes, interference was called. And the Cowboys had a first down at the Minnesota 3-yard line. But then, defying all odds and every law of probability, the Cowboys fumbled for an impossible 9 giveaways in 9 consecutive series of downs. Gary Larson recovered while Garrison's fumbled at the Vikings 2, and from there, with under 5 minutes remaining, the Vikings never relinquished the elusive hog bladder. After a long and hard-won way to the playoffs from July to nearly January, a seemingly interminable 5 minutes at the end of it all left its frustration written across the bowed postures of the beaten Cowboys. The Minnesota Vikings ended the day as they had begun it, controlling the football, playing the game with abandon for love and money, just the way a team should, that has earned the right to all the glory or the grief on the afternoon of champions in 2 weeks' time.